It's a beautiful bacon day, Cookie Crusaders. Today I want to come to you guys and talk to you about something completely brand new, at least something that I don't believe most of you have seen before, and it's actually going to be concerning Dark Mode, Episode 14. So this mode has been a very difficult mode for many players, even just in the regular story mode, not alone the Dark Mode as well. And as you can see at 14-9 on Dark Mode, the power level is 931,000, almost a million for the power level itself. Now, of course, as we've discussed before, matching power for power is not always going to be the case as a strong team, because sometimes the synergies outweigh the power level itself. Now, here's the biggest reasons why this mode is so hard, and that is these three debuffs down here. The healing decrease, so your allies' healing decreases by 65%. The shield HP capacity decreases by 65%, and enemies have a debuff resist increase 40%. So this means that a Claire and some of the other cookies that impose debuffs onto the enemies are really going to be almost cut in half, and that's part of the problem. In addition to that, healing is massively decreased, and that's because Dev Sisters was like, oh yeah, people are just out healing all of the waves and all the problems, which I do in almost all of the episode stories except episode 14. But then the shield capacity, that was the biggest problem, because if they didn't lower that, Pure Vanilla could have still basically held Kingdom and Reign in this mode. Now, there are two ways to go about this. You can either set up the team like this, or like this, for this Dark Mode. And it is a hard mode to complete regardless. I'm still not past 14-9, but I still want to discuss you what I did discover. And so, the biggest part that you're going to need is having the toppings as maximum as you can. The lab upgrades as maximum as you can. The cookie bonds as maximum as you can. If you do not have those, it is going to be very tough for this mode, because this is the Dark Mode of the final episode that we have currently. And so for that point, there's nothing further, so therefore you gotta have the highest of the highest. Now, to go into the detail, what I'm going to discuss is the three things I think you need as substats for you to get the most out of the toppings on each of these cookies. The first, through all of these healers or supports, cooldowns. You can run damage resistance, but the best thing is if you do run damage resistance, you're going to need the full 51%. So 51% damage resistance on all of them if you're going to be running the damage resistance. That is what the top players are doing that are getting a little bit further into Dark Mode, but even then they're still not pulling all of the episodes off. Unless they have legitimately maxed everything, and that includes labs. So that's going to be pretty hard for most players. So what I'm going to cover is a little bit more feasible, still tough, but more doable for most of you. So the cooldown, obviously 25% is the maximum. Going to be hard to get, but really the two big substats you want to focus on, if you can, and I couldn't pull it together yet for most of these, but it still does matter, is the damage resistance and attack. If you can get those two specific stats along with cooldown on your chocolate toppings, that is going to raise the potency of the heals and the overall speed and survivability of your units too. So those are going to be the things that matter the most. So, as you can see, I can't really get much damage resistance and much attack on the cooldowns of all of these cookies. So if I could, I would probably be further into Dark Mode just for that reason alone. Now here's the other important thing. What I have been running is a heavy damage resistance, as 30% is the max you can do on any toppings that aren't almonds. So almost maximum damage resistance on Dark Cacao here, with a very high critical rate and very good overall substats. And that does okay. And I say that because it's still just not enough. But here's the new discovery. Candy toppings with Amplify buff, also paired with debuff resistance. Let me show you the difference, and then I'll explain after what's going on. So we're going to go to this team specifically, and I'll show you why. And we're going to use 14-9 to show you what happens, and we'll just make sure everything's equipped. So we got that. Alright, so we're going to use candy toppings first. So as we go through, we've got the monocle for additional healing. We've got wild berry for damage resistance buffs. We've got pomegranate for attack buffs. We've got parfait for defense and debuff resistant buffs. And then we've got cotton for just great heals altogether. Now, the only person I would even recommend switching out is probably cotton for pure vanilla if you could, for additional shields. But even still, it's still going to be really tough. But as you can see, we're getting through the wave, right? We're in an almost 1 million power enemy zone, and we're still surviving with all cookies alive. Hard to believe on its own even. But I'll explain it more as we go. Because what we're going to do next is we're going to move to the critical toppings with a high damage resistance on them for dark cacao and not change anything else, and show you the difference in the performance of it. Now, as you can see, we haven't beat the round yet, so I'm not going to say that we're going to beat this stage just here, but I do want to show you the comparison between the two and discuss what's happening, because that might be the confusing part for some people. And so as you can see, the monocle's still just barely keeping us alive, pushing as we can. Dark cacao's just trucking along, but in the end we just still didn't have enough power to take it. And this is why I said if you had the higher substats on the healers and supports, the healing would go even further, because their attack power would have been so high for healing. They would have healed cacao to the point where we should be fine. And so overall, they do a good job, but we just don't take it. We don't have enough. And I'll give you the rundown right here. So that's the damage, and that's the healing. And that's with decreased healing. Decreased healing, that's what that is. So, now we're going to change real quick to the apple jelly toppings that I have on dark cacao and show you the difference. And then I'll give you a quick rundown of what the difference is and what's happening. So as you can see, massive damage coming from dark cacao because that's the center focus of the apple jellies. Critical strikes, big hits, big skills, just pushing through as best we can. And we're continuously trucking along, just trying to damage as much as possible. But as you can see, we're still taking quite a lot of damage and having very similar struggles. And then the next part of the wave that we get to will probably be the point where we're going to at least lose wild berry and probably cacao too, just depending on the critical strikes and how lucky we are. And so as you can see, the damage is just flying along on them. They're definitely giving it their all. And it's hard enemies. That's without a doubt, for sure. And then we still do lose dark cacao. And if you remember from the candy toppings, we had 18 seconds left. Where here, we are at the 53-second mark. And then we are going to be perishing momentarily with the rest of our cookies within about the next 6 seconds. And then we lose at 27-second mark. So there was a 10-second difference there. And as you can see, still great healing from them, still great damage. Here's the difference. Amplify buff, I finally figured it out. Finally figured out what's really happening. It's kind of self-aware on its own, but at the same time it's still super confusing. So Amplify buff only works on the cookie that is getting a buff. This does not work for passive buffs. So scroll being, plus X attack, that is not getting buffed further. This also does not change the percentage of the buff either. What it does is it changes the duration, and it increases shields, and it increases the amount of healing that is being done. At least to the cookie that's getting Amplify buff. So, it doesn't make pomegranate, cotton, or parfait a stronger healer. It doesn't make the damage resistance given by wildberry or the attack buff given by pomegranate or the defense and debuff resistance given by parfait larger. It just extends their time. Now that's the important part though. Extending those effects, making them last longer, gives a chance for them to recycle over and overlap. When they overlap, if they're fast enough, pomegranate can then at that point give a 60% attack buff only to dark cacao, because everyone else will have timed out. The defense and debuff resistance from parfait will be doubled, essentially. The damage resistance from wildberry, instead of 15%, would be 30% at that point. So it can overlap. You need to have perfect stats for it to do this. Like I did the math, it's going to take perfect stats both between the cooldown on the cookies running the skills and perfect Amplify buff percentages to get that same overlap on the cookie getting the buff. So this is not making damage resistance longer for everybody, just dark cacao. It's not increasing or extending the attack buff time for everybody, just dark cacao. It's not increasing or extending the time of the defense or debuff resistance for everybody, just dark cacao. And it's a dangerous thing to run for multiple cookies, at least in my current understanding of it, because then you're giving away all the other abilities, all the other good things. And so for that reason, I was only trying it with one cookie. Now, the other thing you can do is you can run it with pure vanilla, and I am going to try maybe pure vanilla and changing out cotton for wildberry, so that way every single person that is running a buff onto dark cacao is doing so and amplified. But everything, shields, duration of buffs, and the amount of healing is all increased with the Amplify buff from the candies. And the other way I could run it is instead of the monocle, I could just run the horn for defense. That is an option. When I'm using pure vanilla instead of wildberry, that lack of damage resistance makes it to where I have to use the horn for extra defense. So that is a reason why that had to be run, so I didn't have the chance to use the monocle for extra healing. So it's a hard pairing and team up, but it is something that I think can push us through episode 14 even further. But you gotta get those stats maxed as high as you can on all those toppings. It's gonna be very, very difficult otherwise, and you're gonna have to get the labs upgraded as well if you want to take it even further. Because I can show you here in my labs, I do not have maximum when it comes to some of these cookies. So 8 out of 10 for the HP on a support cookie, 5 out of 10 on the defense, 8 out of 10 on the attack, 5 out of 10 on HP2. So these are all things, if I upgrade those, it will make it easier for sure. But those toppings still mattered quite a lot. They mattered quite a lot. And so that is something I want to show you guys. And it will matter even more as new cookies come out, because the more that we have an ability to buff any cookie, that one cookie can get massive buffs, have them extended, have healing increased. It can do some crazy things. And if you guys want to, I can show you how it runs in PvP and some of the other modes. But let me know if that's something that you're interested to see in the comments, please, because I can definitely dive into it more, but I want to hear your feedback. Thank you so much for coming by, and I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'm excited to explore this further and show you how it goes. Thank you.